This weekend, Khabib won a dominant decision over Raging Al. Despite several clear 10-8 rounds, and Khabib never looking in danger for 25 minutes, Joe Rogan was less than complimentary of his performance. In particular, Joe Rogan was critical of Khabib's striking in rounds 3 to 5, questioning why Khabib was allowing it to stay on the feet, and not looking to take down Raging Al immediately.
Khabib's, for the most part, been outstriking him.
He has, but it's not impressive. This is no way dominance on the feet. This round is very disappointing for Nurmagomedov. And it looks to me like Nurmagomedov is slowing down.
These comments drew pushback from Joe Rogan's own commentary teammates.
Standards are so high, Joe.
From Khabib's coach, Javier Mendez.
I didn't understand what the hell's going on because he totally based that thing completely wrong.
And even his opponent, Raging Al.
I don't even know what he wanted. I don't know what Joe Rogan was looking for.
Everyone is entitled to their own interpretation of the fight. So here's my 2 cents to add to the mix. The fact remains that on the feet, the stats show that Khabib outstruck Raging Al by a large margin. Furthermore, Khabib was unable to bring it to the ground for rounds 3 and 4, and the first half of round 5. These two outcomes surprised many, and in my opinion, they can be explained by an important adjustment made by Raging Al after getting taken down in the first 2 rounds.
I got taken down. I figured out where. I figured out kind of how to keep it. I wanted to keep it on the feet and how to do that. I knew keep pushing him forward.
Raging Al had very little time to study Khabib before this fight, and had to do his scouting in the cage. Look at what he does every time Khabib jabs. As you can see from the footage, in the first 2 rounds, Raging Al was constantly falling for the jab feint. Every time Khabib flicked his jab at him, Raging Al would react and start reaching. By having his arm drawn away from his body, Khabib's task of getting to his legs was much easier. Khabib is an excellent chain wrestler, and he doesn't look for blast doubles in the center. What he needs is that first firm grip around your leg, that he can then use to improvise for a takedown. For the first 2 rounds, Raging Al's reaching kept opening that small window for Khabib to risk going for his legs. This reaching at Khabib's jab led to the 2 easy takedowns for Khabib in the first 2 rounds. Raging Al made an adjustment after this though. Look at his reaction to jabs and feints for the rest of the fight. Raging Al stopped reaching for the jab, opting to either try slip or parry sideways when he could. He no longer got lured into taking his arms far from his body by Khabib's jabs or feints. Now, this was not a perfect counter and he was eating many jabs in the process, but at least he was not conceding takedowns which would have put him much deeper in the hole. Keeping his arms in gave Raging Al the precious microseconds to get his arms in between to defend takedowns. Seeing that his usual jab setup was no longer working, Khabib's shot output dropped for the rest of the fight. Keeping his arms in also gave Raging Al access to another takedown defense, framing. Though this tactic has been heavily discredited by many internet experts as a viable defense to Khabib, it appeared to be quite effective for Raging Al through large stretches of the fight. I await explanations as to how this was possible. Not reacting to jabs allowed Raging Al to control the center of the cage and not get backed into the fence. Here you can see Khabib backing up to a feint by Raging Al. When Khabib feints back though, Raging Al yields no ground at all. Seeing through Khabib's jab feint setup also allowed Raging Al to start walking Khabib down, to try lure him into a brawl.
That was perfect for Al to say I was letting him hit me, get him to think into a slugfest. That was actually really good on their part. And also, he was the aggressor. He came at him. He was in the middle. He came at him, so that was really good.
Raging Al was willing to take jabs to encourage Khabib to keep striking, so that he could look for the knockout counter. This baiting by Raging Al was the reason such a high strike tally was racked up by Khabib. And while this was somewhat effective, Khabib backed out of most of Raging Al's heavy counters. One wonders if things might have been different if Raging Al was more patient, and went for less power shot counter strikes when Khabib committed. Nonetheless, Khabib eventually goes back to plan A.
Go back to father plan.
Midway in round 5, Khabib finally bites the bullet, and bull rushes Raging Al to the fence for the takedown. Which brings me to my final question. Why did Khabib do so much submission hunting and back taking? Raging Al gave up his back multiple times, but Khabib's usual devastating riding was absent. Raging Al is an advanced grappler and wrestler, and his grappling acumen allowed him to constantly frustrate Khabib from locking down wrist control and trapping him in a ride. Here you can see Khabib is reaching for Raging Al's wrist. Rather than return to his elbow and concede wrist control, Raging Al rolls through and gives up his back. Here, Khabib has walked Raging Al's hips close enough to where he can get inside wrist control. Recognizing the danger, Raging Al turns away before Khabib can make the switch and lock down a ride. In another close call, Khabib has controlled Raging Al's wrist. He is looking to bring his free hand under to get inside wrist control. Raging Al immediately goes after Khabib's free hand and controls it. Stalled out. Khabib resets and tries something else instead. Even though Raging Al gave up his back, he never stopped fighting. He constantly looked for the tripod, rather than rest on his elbows, which would have made wrist control easier. This tripoding forced Khabib to look for mat returns instead. In closing, this fight answered many questions, but also created some new ones. To me though, the main question is, what does the future hold for Khabib? Khabib has been very public about defending his belt, but his father has offered a more candid view on Khabib's future at lightweight.
Мы вообще не поднимались больше 85. Поэтому это с каждым разом тяжелее, он становится крупнее, он возмужал, он уже готов на 77 подраться, а мы бьемся только в том весе, легком весе. И нам очень тяжело в этом весе. Я думаю, если нам удастся завоевать пояс, одна защита, и на этом округлимся в этом весе.
Matchups with Woodley, GSP, and even Colby Covington all sound pretty interesting to me. Who do you think Khabib will fight next? Do let me know in the comments. Till next time.